Picture this, it's January 30th, 2025. The United States government, under legal pressure from Congress, dumps over 3 million pages of documents onto the internet, 2,000 videos, 180,000 images, all tied to one of the most talked about criminal cases in modern history. And what do they do the very next day? They quietly pull thousands of those documents back down. Not because someone hacked the site, not because there was a glitch. They pulled them down because the documents they just released accidentally exposed the real names, home addresses, and bank details of the very victims they swore to protect. Meanwhile, the names of the people who actually enabled the crimes still blacked out. That tells you everything you need to know about what's actually going on here. This isn't a story about one predator anymore. This is about a system that has spent nearly 2 decades protecting the powerful while sacrificing everyone else. And today we're going to walk through exactly how that happened to understand where we are. Today, you have to go back to 2005 because that's when the first crack appeared in this story and nobody fixed it. A mother in Palm Beach, Florida, went to the police. Her 14-year-old daughter had been sexually abused by a man named Jeffrey Epstein. The police took it seriously. They spent over a year running an undercover operation, and by the time it was done, they had found dozens of victims. Some of them were as young as 13. The case got sent up to the federal level. A prosecutor named Alexander Acosta was running the show. His team put together what was supposed to be the case of a lifetime, a 60-count indictment, 30 confirmed victims, and the FBI was still actively digging for more. And then Acosta made a decision that changed everything. He shut it down in 2007. His office cut a deal with Epstein that let him walk away from federal sex trafficking charges entirely. Epstein pleaded guilty to 2 minor state charges. He got 13 months in jail. But here is the part that makes your stomach turn. He was allowed to leave that jail up to 12 hours a day, every single day. He basically got to go home and come back at night. A federal judge later looked at that deal and said it violated the rights of the victims. The Doge's own people admitted Acosta showed terrible judgment. And still, absolutely nobody was held accountable for it. That deal did something else too. It gave legal protection to everyone connected to Epstein. His co-conspirators were covered. The victims never even got to know the terms of what was agreed, and the federal investigation just stopped. Years go by, and then in July 2019, prosecutors in New York decided to try again. New charges, new evidence, and this time they were pushing for up to 45 years in prison. 6 weeks later, Epstein is found dead in his jail cell. The government called it suicide, and just like that, the prosecution evaporated. But here's something that came out in the files released this year. The way Epstein's body was handled after his death is deeply strange. Staff at the facility used boxes and sheets to create what looked like a body and loaded it into a white van from the medical examiner's office. Journalists followed that van, but the actual body was moved out in a completely different black vehicle, completely unnoticed at a different time. That's not standard procedure. And now the documents are out there for people to see it. When the prosecutor at the time announced Epstein's death, he specifically said the investigation into the broader network would keep going. He used the word conspiracy in legal language. That's not something you say casually. That means they already knew other people were involved. Fast forward to late 2025. Congress passed a law called the Epstein Files Transparency Act. It passed 427 to 1 in the House. The Senate passed it unanimously. President Trump signed it. The law said one thing, clearly release all unclassified documents connected to Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell within 30 days. The DOJ missed the deadline. When they finally did release material on January 30th, Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche stood in front of cameras and told the country that the DOJ had fully complied with the law, that this was the end of the process, done, except it wasn't done. Not even close. The DOJ itself had flagged over 6 million pages as potentially relevant to this case. They released about 3.5 million. That means they are sitting on roughly 2.5 million pages and calling it full compliance with a law that said release everything. Members of Congress from both parties started asking the obvious question: how do you release half the documents and then tell us you followed the law? Representative Ro Khanna, who actually helped write the Transparency Act, said it directly. Withholding these files does nothing except protect the powerful people who were involved. Let's talk about what actually came out, because even the portion they chose to release is explosive. 3 photographs dropped showing a man who appears to be Prince Andrew kneeling over a woman lying on the floor. In one of them, he's looking directly at the camera. In another, his hand is on her stomach. No date, no location, no explanation from the DOJ, just the images. But the photographs are honestly the smaller part of the story. The emails are what really matter. An account labeled "The Duke" was exchanging messages with Epstein in August of 2010, just months after Epstein got out. From under that sweetheart, Bill Epstein told this account he knew a 26-year-old Russian woman and offered to set up dinner in London. The reply came back saying he would be delighted and asked Epstein to hand over his contact details directly. Then a month later, in September 2010, the same account suggested dinner at Buckingham Palace, and attached to that suggestion was the phrase "lots of privacy." Andrew has denied everything for years. He settled Virginia Giuffre's civil lawsuit for millions without admitting to anything. King Charles stripped him of his royal titles just months ago. But here's what's so telling. After he stepped down from royal duties in 2019, Andrew publicly said he was willing to help any law enforcement agency investigate Epstein. Then the documents showed that over the next 10 months, his lawyers blocked every single attempt to actually interview him. They kept pushing to answer questions only in writing. The prosecutors eventually gave up trying to get him in a room. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer went on record just days ago saying Andrew should testify. Before the U.S. Congress, Andrew has not responded. He has never once given sworn testimony about Epstein, not once. This isn't just an American story anymore. The moment these files hit, Europe started shaking. Peter Mandelson, one of the most powerful political figures in Britain, and until very recently, the UK ambassador to the United States, showed up over 5,000 times in the released documents. Emails show him calling Epstein his chief life advisor. Records indicate Epstein made payments totaling $75,000 to accounts tied to Mandelson. On February 1st, Mandelson resigned from the Labour Party. He's now facing pressure to leave the House of Lords entirely. UK Prime Minister Starmer has publicly called for him to step down. The Metropolitan Police has confirmed they're looking into potential misconduct in public office. In Slovakia, Miroslav Lajčák, former president of the United Nations General Assembly, resigned after emails surfaced showing Epstein had invited him to private dinners. Norway's crown princess Mette Marit publicly admitted she showed poor judgment in never having contact with Epstein. One after another, the walls are closing in across Europe. A photograph from the year 2000 was part of the released files. It shows Donald Trump, Melania Trump, Jeffrey Epstein, and Ghislaine Maxwell together at Mar-a-Lago. The moment journalists started asking questions about Melania's connection to Epstein's world, her legal team went on the offensive. Her personal attorney started sending threatening letters to journalists threatening $1 billion in damages if they did retract and apologize. It worked at first. James Carville apologized publicly. The Daily Beast pulled an entire story. But one person didn't stop. Michael Wolff, the author who wrote Fire and Fury and spent years interviewing Epstein himself, didn't back down. On October 22, 2025, Wolff filed his own lawsuit against Melania Trump under New York's anti-SLAPP law, and that filing gave him something incredibly powerful: subpoena power. That means Wolff can now compel people to testify under oath. He said publicly that what he wants more than anything is to get both Donald and Melania Trump answering questions about their relationship with Epstein. Think about that. Melania's legal team tried to shut a journalist up, and instead they handed him the exact legal tools to drag the White House into sworn testimony. Let me bring your attention to a number that's barely gotten any coverage. 8, an internal FBI document from August 2019, 5 days after Epstein died, listed 9 people identified as family members and associates. 8 of them were labeled co-conspirators. Most of their names are still redacted. 8 co-conspirators, and in the entire history of this case, across almost 20 years, exactly 1 person has been criminally charged: Ghislaine Maxwell. She was convicted in 2021. She's serving 20 years. 7 other people at minimum have never faced a single criminal charge. And remember what Acosta's deal in 2007 did. It gave legal cover to co-conspirators. The deal that was supposed to be about Epstein ended up protecting the people around him. While all of this political maneuvering is going on, something happened to the actual victims that's genuinely shocking. When the DOJ released the files on January 30th, they promised that victim identities would be protected. Within 48 hours, attorneys representing over 200 alleged victims called what happened the single most egregious violation of victim privacy in one day in United States history. Nearly 100 individual survivors had their full names, personal information, bank details, and home addresses exposed completely unredacted. At least one woman who had never publicly come forward as a victim was outed for the first time. One of the victims wrote to the court saying she had been inundated with disgusting private messages since her name went up. Others reported receiving death threats. The attorneys for the survivors put it bluntly: there's no level of incompetence. That can explain what happened here. The DOJ spent months being told exactly who needed to be protected, and then they failed to protect them while carefully redacting the names of the people who were actually connected to the crimes. The House Oversight Committee has issued a subpoena demanding the full unredacted files. It hasn't been fulfilled. 2.5 million pages of documents are still being withheld. The Wolff lawsuit against Melania Trump is alive, and the subpoena power behind it is real. And the 8 co-conspirators from that FBI document, 7 of them have never been charged with anything. Here's what this case actually revealed: not just one man, a system. A system where wealth and connections allowed decades of criminal conduct to continue because the people who were supposed to stop it made choices one after another that kept it going. The sweetheart deal, the sealed documents, the dead defendant, the withheld files. Every single one of those was a decision made by someone who had the power to act differently. Virginia Giuffre, the woman whose lawsuits forced so much of this into public view, died in April 2025. She never saw anyone other than Maxwell held criminally accountable for what was done to her. This isn't over. The documents are out there. The court cases are on the record. The pattern is visible to anyone willing to look at it honestly. Stay informed, pay attention to what happens next, and hold every single institution in this chain accountable for what they knew and when they knew it.